Some big news in the Big Ten, 5 teams ranked in the top 10 in the AP. Heck, I think that's the first time. And that's obviously happened for the Big Ten. I'm trying to think back if the SEC's had it done, maybe 4. I don't know if they've got a full 5. Someone can probably get ticked off if I'm misremembering that, but you're right there. And you've got Iowa after their big victory against Penn State. And, speaking of quarterback changes, I mean, Roberson comes in after Clifford gets knocked out. I don't know what the extent of Clifford's injury is. Look to maybe be a watching him go down, non-throwing shoulder potential separation. What's the grade on that? Can he come back? Because Penn State didn't fall out of it now. They just fell to 7th. They're the 3rd highest ranked one-loss team behind Bama and Ohio State. So Sean Clifford, who was looking good at 17-3, he gets knocked out, and then that Iowa defense begins to ratchet up a little bit. And I don't put that on James Franklin. You're bringing in, your backup quarterback, and James Franklin's an easy target too, because he's mismanaged some games, but I don't necessarily put all this on him. You're bringing in your backup quarterback in a very, very hostile environment. You've got a nice lead, but it's going to be tough to nurse that lead all the way through. And they got it close. They had it right there. They had their chances. Ultimately couldn't convert and ultimately couldn't get it done. It's just the offense began to sputter because so much of that Penn State offense is now relying on Sean Clifford in that rhythmic passing game, moving the ball down the field with some of those shorter to intermediate routes. They take the shots over the top to Jahan Dotson, but the running of the football hasn't been spectacular. So they rely on Sean Clifford to do a lot. And I don't know if Roberson's built like that. And he's definitely not as experienced as Clifford. So we'll see when Sean comes back, and then ultimately, what Roberson's going to be able to do moving forward, should he be the guy, because we're getting into the teeth of this now. You've got Michigan State ranked 10th, you got Ohio State ranked 6th, Penn State drops to 7th, and Michigan's sitting there at 8. I mean, that's the Big Ten East all right there, slugfest, and you're going to have some of those games back to back as we start to end up the season, as Ohio State will take on Michigan State and Michigan back to back. They got Penn State Halloween. I mean, there's some really, really good games that are going to be transpiring in the Big Ten, and Michigan able to hold off Nebraska. I don't know how they were able to pull that thing out. They were able to, to run the football decently. Did a pretty good job against that. Got some, help with a couple big runs. Cade McNamara threw for about 250. He's going to need to do more of that and continue to improve. It comes down to the fumble at the end. Adrian Martinez, the Nebraska quarterback, like, you're right there. It's 29 all. You're driving the football. And this Nebraska team, they're sitting there. They're so close. They're 3-4. I mean, they've improved dramatically, and they just haven't been able to find the result. But that's what it is in football. Sometimes you've got to make the plays at the end of the game. Michigan ultimately gets the fumble back, moves it enough to kick a field goal. They win the game. They stay undefeated, survive and advance. It was in Lincoln. It was an electric environment. It was rolling, and you would have thought that would have been enough to help pull it out. I know Big Red Nation, the Husker Nation, was ready to go, for that matchup. And Nebraska's close. I don't think Scott Frost gets fired, because I think you look at this season, you realize outside of that Illinois loss earlier in the year, they've really improved. And the Big Ten's pretty darn good. And college football is standing on its head this year because of, I think, a lot of the chickens are coming home to roost for all that time missed with COVID and trying to get some of these young guys in. You get some injuries. All of a sudden, you're trying to figure out what the heck you have. And so you're seeing a lot of topsy-turviness happening here as we're in the middle, basically the midway point of the college football season. And then that brings ultimately to Ohio State, who lost early on, looked bad, but since the Tulsa game, have gotten progressively better. The offense has always been there, and it's always kind of been explosive. But CJ Stroud looks really accurate now. He's throwing for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. The receivers have been tremendous. The offensive lines looked good. I mean, Travion Henderson, if he keeps putting up numbers like this, he'll be in New York for the Heisman, because his highlights are fantastic. The true freshman running back for the Buckeyes is just setting the world on fire. And he's really good in the pass game too. You hit him with a swing, and it's watching him weave around guys, to the tune of 30, 40, 50 yards sometimes. But it's that Buckeye defense that's really improved ever since, shifting around some of the things that they've done, making the change, coordinator. I think that it's been very, very impressive how they've continued to improve. The linebackers have gotten, much better. Tyleik Williams, the young nose tackle freshman, just disrupting a ton up front. You combined him and Haskell Garrett, who got nicked up a little bit in the game. against a Maryland team that we thought, coming in, they got beat up by Iowa, but they had skill on the outside. So it seemed like a team that was going to be able to score the football, but OSU dominating in every phase. And so you're looking at this now and trying to project potentially what it could be down the line. And it looks like this talent that everybody openly acknowledges when you see the recruiting rankings, you watch these teams play, like Ohio State seems like the most talented team in the Big Ten. Does that mean they're going to win every game? No, but you got to go out there and you have to prove it, and you have to continue to develop that talent. And it finally seems like Ohio State, that talent is beginning to pay off. And Ryan Day said it was going to be a little bumpy for the next couple of weeks. They've made some mistakes. They've blown some coverages on the back end, but this team has continued to improve. It's really starting to look pretty good. So we'll see. You got a bye week, Indiana, and then they really start getting into the meat of that schedule as they've got Penn State, Michigan State and Michigan kind of all over the last three games of the last 6 weeks of the season. So that'll all be revealed. And then Iowa most likely going to go undefeated. I don't think Wisconsin can challenge them this year. Not another ranked opponent on their schedule. Maybe they drop a spot in the polls. Maybe they drop 2 spots, but they're going to be a top 5 team should they remain undefeated in the Big Ten title game. Now, the team that's sitting at third is very, very interesting. And it's Cincinnati. They came out and did what they needed to do on a Friday night against Temple. They beat Notre Dame handily. And then the next week, it's always the follow-up. Is there going to be a letdown? Will they start, as the kids say, feeling themselves a little bit? They came out and they acted accordingly on a national stage. And that's going to afford them then the opportunity now where people are like, okay, we've watched them do it. They beat Notre Dame. They're moving on. We'll get into Notre Dame in a minute. But they don't really have a super strong schedule down the back half. Maybe SMU continues to win and they can get a nice win there, or a nice big game at least against SMU, and that would help some. But Cincinnati, I think people are giving them the benefit of the doubt.